NFL teams spend a massive amount of money in free agency. Now, some teams appear set to be up for improvement, while other squads, they may have taken a step back. We're going to discuss those teams on today's RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, sponsored by Pool Genius and Edge Boost. I'm Jim Coventry, joined by Anthony Cervino. Now, today's show, we're going to break down the teams that we feel won and lost free agency to this point. Teams include Minnesota Vikings, Chicago Bears, Washington Commanders, San Francisco 49ers, and the Kansas City Chiefs. Anthony Cervino, we are going to start with a little bit of news that came out Monday morning, though. The show is being recorded at 10 a.m. Eastern on Monday. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins both get their long-term deals. Chase, record-breaking 4 years, $161 million. T. Higgins did not do bad for himself, 4 years, $115 million. As you had mentioned off air that they want Trey Hendrickson to come back. Regardless, Anthony, the way I see it is this. The Bengals right now are investing so much money in Burrow, Chase, and Higgins. They've also got Chase Brown at running back. They brought back Mike Gesicki on a contract. This is going to be fun for fantasy because this team, the Bengals, they are going to need to outscore everybody because that defense is probably not close to being good. This is fun for fantasy. Chase obviously will continue to be a megastar for fantasy. Higgins has had that injury history. So as great as a contract is, he's very tough to trust at his typical ADP. Thoughts on these two players signing long-term?
I think this is great for the Bengals and really great for fantasy football. As you said, this Bengals team, the offense is loaded between Burrow, Chase, and Higgins. Gesicki, they even re-signed. The majority of their cap is tied up into these players, primarily Burrow, Higgins, and Chase. Defensively, even if they do bring back Trey Hendrickson, this is a team where the defense is going to be a handicap. We saw it last year. To be in games and to win games, they had to score points. They had to put up yards, which is outstanding for fantasy football. And obviously, ADP, when it comes to targeting these players in fantasy, it might be a little bit tough to stack these guys because you're going to be paying a premium for not only Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and I can realistically see T. Higgins in that second round where Chase is obviously going at the top of the first. I can also see a world where Joe Burrow might be a fourth-round pick. So if you're going all in on a Bengals stack, it's going to cost you a lot. You're going to be putting a lot of your early eggs in one basket.
There's no doubt. Well, the show today, we're going to talk about winners and losers in terms of NFL teams and free agency. I believe the Minnesota Vikings won free agency. I gave them a grade of an A. I'm a tough grader, too. I don't give many A's. I don't give many B's. But I see the Vikings getting an A. Now, here's what they did. They retained cornerback Byron Murphy, 3 years, $66 million. I think that was just a solid add. Retention, I should say, as he did play well for them last year. Bringing back Aaron Jones, 2 years, $20 million. He did fade down the stretch. I don't think he hit over 73 rushing yards in his last 8 games after going way over that in a number of the early games, but he still played well. Even the older Harrison Smith at safety they brought back, but what they added, the offensive line. They'll get Christian Darrisaw back from injury. They're all world left tackle, but they bring in the guard, Will Freeze from the Colts, 5 years, $88 million. He's a very good interior lineman. Also from the Colts, Ryan Kelly. Now, Kelly may be on a bit of a decline, but he's not old. 2 years, $18 million, very affordable contract. Probably needed a change of scenery. The Vikings also traded for Jordan Mason at running back. So I think with the power of Mason, that's a very good 1-2 punch with Aaron Jones and Mason. I think that's going to be a great tandem for them with that rebuilt offensive line. Even on the defensive side, Jonathan Allen, who was with the Commanders, defensive tackle, 3 years, $60 million, not the game wrecker he was 3 years ago, but still well above average. They pair him up at defensive tackle with Javon Hargrave, 2 years, $30 million. The 49ers couldn't afford him. Again, Hargrave, not the player he was 3 years ago, but still very good. And then there were some depth adds beyond that. What are your thoughts on Minnesota's free agency, Anthony?
Yeah, Minnesota absolutely crushed it. And defensively, with those additions to an already menacing defense under Brian Flores, they can pressure the quarterback. I think that unit got even stronger, primarily in their front seven. offensively, I love what they did with Jordan Mason. This is one of my favorite moves of the offseason so far. Jordan Mason was an excellent runner last year for San Francisco when he was healthy, filling in for Christian McCaffrey. And I'm a little surprised that San Francisco moved off of him, but I know with the restricted tag or the tender going on Mason, they had to guarantee him roughly $5 million. And this is a San Francisco team that needs to free up money to re-sign Purdy. But when it comes to this backfield, last year, Aaron Jones, I believe, despite in his past when he had top 5 fantasy seasons, last year, I believe he had his highest total yards of his career. He had a lot of touches last year. And this is a running back pushing 30 years old. His only real competition last year was Ty Chandler and Cam Akers. I think to get the longevity this year out of Aaron Jones, who broke down last season, Jordan Mason's going to take some touches away, ease the workload. And I think this 1-2 punch tandem is going to be one of the better ones in the NFL. My biggest concern out of Minnesota, who looks like a team that wants to contend for a Super Bowl, is the quarterback position. Outside of that, Minnesota could be the team to beat outside of Philly in the NFC if they hit on the quarterback position, whether it's a veteran or J.J. McCarthy.
And it's going to be interesting because, as you intimate, the quarterback position. And if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have much.
Yeah.
Because everything else can be right. But that's the most important position in sports. And J.J. McCarthy, I saw him as a project coming in. He lost development last year because of the injury he sustained that cost him the entire season. That's an important note. I do think Aaron Rodgers, if he's willing to go there, this would be a perfect spot for Rodgers. My opinion, okay, maybe I'm wrong, but it looked to me like when Aaron Rodgers was under pressure last year, he would kind of curl up. He didn't want to get hit. Well, in Minnesota, we saw it with Sam Darnold until teams blitzed him relentlessly. We saw it was a good offensive line, but they upgraded that. Darrisaw's back, like I said earlier. They brought in Kelly and they brought in Freeze. So that's going to be solid. We know that Kevin O'Connell schemes open quick passes, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. You can even dump off to Aaron Jones. You got all these weapons. Aaron Rodgers probably would not get hit a lot if he was the quarterback. That makes him very dangerous in the spot because there wouldn't be a lot he needed to do. And if the Achilles was still an issue for mobility, they could literally run him out of shotgun. In that offense, they could do that, and that would mitigate those problems. But if they don't address the quarterback, I don't know if McCarthy is the answer. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he is. But that's going to be a big point. But up till this point, I think we both agree Minnesota has been a massive winner in free agency. Now, Anthony, before we move to our next team, the Chicago Bears, we're going to point out all the teams I had as winners all have quarterbacks on rookie deals. That is important. When you have a quarterback on a rookie deal, you can spend. We look at teams like the Chiefs, other teams like that are paying their quarterbacks. It's very hard to construct a full team around those. So that's one of the importances of free agency. All right, we move to the Chicago Bears. Now, I give the Bears a B+. I put them as the second best free agent winner. And it centers around the offensive line moves. Trades, 2 of them. Bears trade for Jonah Jackson from the Rams. Now, remember, Jonah Jackson was hurt a lot last year. The Rams tried to move him to center. That really didn't work well. But Jonah Jackson did play with Coach Ben Johnson in Detroit for a number of years. The Bears pick up Joe Thuney, 32-year-old guard from the Chiefs. Still one of the best guards in the NFL. Age at 32 for a star guard does not worry me. I could see him playing till 35 without an issue. And then in free agency, they Drew Dahlman, the center from Atlanta, 3 years, $42 million. And the beauty here, Anthony, is Atlanta ran a lot of zone run concepts. Dahlman was a big part of the movement from the center position on those. And that's what Ben Johnson needs in his center in this offense. Last year, the Bears' interior offensive line was so bad that whenever a team would run a simulated pressure at them, those rushers would be in the backfield as quickly as Caleb Williams took the snap. Caleb Williams could not develop last year because of that. The Bears, Jonah Jackson's a bit of a wild card, but if he's healthy, he's good enough. This potentially gives the Bears an excellent interior We know they have Braxton Jones on. They drafted him in the 5th round a few years back, but he's good. And their right tackle, Darnell Wright, they drafted with the number 10 pick, I believe, last year. So he's still developing. This offensive line, which was a problem, could now be a big strength. A couple ads on the defensive side. Grady Jarrett, aging player, 3 years, 43. It was an overpay, but it still could stabilize their defense a bit. Dio Dengbo, edge rusher, 3 year, $48 million. The Bears need a bit of a pass rush. And then they added Olamide Zaccheaus late in free agency, which if Keenan Allen doesn't come back, he could be decent in the slot for them. What are your thoughts on the Bears offseason?
Yeah, offensively, the Bears had one issue to address. That was the offensive line after Caleb Williams was sacked. I think it was 67, 68 times, third most any quarterback has been sacked in NFL history. And they do that by bringing in 3 new starters. I like the Grady Jarrett addition on defense, 10-year player in Atlanta, very good interior defensive lineman. And Chicago fortifying the trenches. I think this is going to be big for what this Bears team wants to do this year. I get you have Caleb Williams want to throw the football, but offensively, you still have to establish the run. The running backs in Detroit under Ben Johnson, the offensive line were big parts of that offense to open up the pass. And I think, upgrading this offensive line, I do think there's still room to add a running back to get this offense where they want it to go. They're doing the right things. They're trending in the right direction. And even defensively, getting more opportunistic defense and getting players in there who can pressure the quarterback and turn over the football to give this offense more opportunities. I love what the Bears done so far. But again, you still need a running back.
Yes. So for fantasy, as you say today, DeAndre Swift is a running back. And look, in Detroit, you had David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, both outstanding running backs. DeAndre Swift is not an outstanding running back. He's a compiler at best right now. He hasn't been a great runner. And they likely will bring in another back. But I think regardless of who they bring in, because I don't think the Bears are spending a super high draft pick on a running back. I don't see them doing that. I could be wrong. If that happens, I think Ben Johnson crafts a pass-first offense. It's not Detroit. He's not bringing Detroit's offense here. What I saw in Detroit, Anthony, was that Ben Johnson put together an offense that maximized his limited quarterback, Jared Goff. Jared Goff, very good throw into the middle of the field. Some quicker stuff outside. But arm strength to the outside was a problem for Jared Goff. So Johnson put an offense in place. Caleb Williams, he's going to have a lot more options. Caleb Williams ran for over 400 yards this year. He's a mobile quarterback if needed. That's an element Goff doesn't have. DJ Moore, very different than any of the receivers they had in Detroit. DJ Moore is a legitimate superstar, can win in so many ways. Rome Odunze, if he can play to his draft capital, he could be way better than anything they had in Detroit. So this is a very different team. But as of today, given the running back situation, I would take the discounts on the Bears passing game in fantasy drafts again, unless there's a drastic change in the backfield. Quick thoughts on fantasy.
Yeah, fantasy-wise, I'm buying into this Bears offense. I like Ben Johnson. I love the fact they brought in these 3 new offensive linemen to solidify up front, give Caleb Williams time. I don't know what's going on with Keenan Allen yet. There's a chance they could bring him back, but if they're going to run with the Dunze, Kmet, and DJ Moore, I think right now anyway, I'm in a dynasty startup draft. I find myself, I took Caleb Williams in the back of the first round, and it was super flex. When a lot of the other quarterbacks went out early, I'm going to buy in because if Caleb Williams hits the way that he could potentially hit, you're getting him this year in a startup, especially in Dynasty, at a value, and he could be a top 5 to 6 Dynasty quarterback moving forward.
100% on that. I am buying. I do think, like you say, Caleb Williams is in a great situation. If he's even 90, 85% of the talent we thought he was coming in, he's going to thrive here because Jared Goff was able to do amazing things with Ben Johnson. I see more of the same in Chicago. If you ever had your debit card declined or had to call your bank at 3 a.m. in Vegas, Edge Boost is the first consumer-facing online bank dedicated to the gaming industry. Now, there are numerous benefits using Edge Boost. $250K a day in debit deposits, unlimited withdrawals, cash back on sports betting, DFS, and sweeps. Deposit $25, you get $25. 100% approval for all gaming activity, financial segmentation and discretion, and responsible gaming. Compatible today for prediction markets, iCasino, DFS, sports betting, lottery, brick and mortar casinos, horse racing, and sweeps. No transaction reviews or account freezes. You visit edgeboost.bet and you use the promo code ROTOPOD. So again, edgeboost.bet. The promo code is ROTOPOD. Anthony Cervino, we are continuing our list of winners and losers by team in free agency. I have the Washington Commanders as a winner in this. I have them as a B+. I do think it's going to be a lot of contingencies here, though. I think this could go a lot of different ways, but we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt for the moves. They traded for Deebo Samuel. Now, Anthony, I want to point out, in 2021, I believe Deebo Samuel had about 1,770 yards and 17 combined touchdowns. In the last 3 years, he's averaged about 14 games played, about 929 scrimmage yards in Kyle Shanahan's offense. So Deebo Samuel has been nowhere close to the player he was in that career year. But in his yards after the catch rate, he was still over the 95th percentile. So a lot of things can happen. I do have a little concern him being out of Shanahan's offense. But Deebo, if he's right, is a great addition for them. They pick up Laramie Tunsil in a trade as well, left tackle from the Texans. Now, Tunsil had a down year last year, but the entire Texans line struggled. So there is a chance we can get a bounce back from Tunsil. So I think addressing the line that way makes sense. They retained Bobby Wagner, linebacker, and Zach Ertz on cheap deals. Other players they brought in: defensive tackle Javon Kinlaw. That pretty much replaces Jonathan Allen. And it probably is kind of a lateral move given where especially Jonathan Allen was at in terms of aging. He was down a little bit. And then there were some minor additions, nothing major. But I think those top-heavy moves gave him a high grade. What are your thoughts about the fantasy side of the offense for the Commanders with these deals?
You know, the Commanders last year, they were already, a force to be reckoned with. Advanced almost to a Super Bowl. Now in year two, they didn't go backwards, right? Because we saw the Texans in year two for C.J. Stroud go a little bit backwards with some of their offseason moves. That's not the case here. They go and get Laramie Tunsil, one of the best left tackles still in the NFL, to protect Jaden Daniels. That offensive line at times was an issue. They go upgrade the wide receiver room in a big way. I get that, Diami Brown and Zacchaeus, they made plays here and there, but Deebo Samuel, I get he's not the same guy as 3 or 4 years ago, but he is still a legitimate playmaker when healthy, and he might not be looked at as the one with the way Terry McLaurin played last year. So Deebo Samuel will probably get the secondary coverage, while Terry McLaurin can still do what he does. And when it comes to Zach Ertz, I get Zach Ertz is getting older, but there's something here in this system with Cliff Kingsbury. Ertz, in terms of fantasy, I believe averages over 10 PPR points per game in every game played with Cliff Kingsbury. The backfield, I still have some question marks. Brian Robinson's a nice running back. Austin Eckler had a nice season, but this is a team that I do think in the NFL draft, they should address that position.
So last year, I believe the Eagles had the blueprint for slowing down the Commanders' offense. Now, I know there was that game where Jalen Hurts got injured and the game went off the rails, but the first time they played in week 11 or 12, and then in the playoffs, we kind of saw the formula. The formula was you drop the defenders back and you don't let Daniels have the deep pass. And you let him have all the flat and underneath passes he wants. And at the time, it was Zach Ertz, who wasn't going to get much after the catch. He was great for fantasy. Austin Eckler, when he was healthy, he was able to do a little bit of damage after the catch. But I think the Deebo Samuel ad was a direct response to that. So if that's how defense are going to approach them, and if there's not going to be wholesale changes in the Commanders' offense, if you're going to give them the short passes, well, they get it to Deebo Samuel, who I said earlier is still over the 95th percentile in yards after the catch. And if you're giving him a lot of space to run, that will make defenses have to back down from the deep coverage. They'll have to take much more seriously the underneath. So I think this was a reactive move. The question will be, how will Jaden Daniels develop? And we don't have an answer for that. But based on what we saw at the end of last year, this is a very good antidote for how teams approach them. Any final words?
Yeah, Washington, the Deebo move, and I think we said it when we initially reacted to it, I like it a lot more for a team chasing a Super Bowl in the NFC versus fantasy. At the right price, I still think Deebo Samuel is going to be in play for me. But if we see his ADP rise up to a point I can't pay, then I'm going to be out.
No doubt. Let's go to our next team, another winner in free agency. I have the Denver Broncos graded out at a B and the fourth winner in free agency. They retained their defensive tackle, DJ Jones, 3 years, $39 million. Thought that was a very smart addition or retention for them. The signings, there's only 3 of note, but I think they really hit important points. Tight end Evan Ingram, 2 years, $23 million. We know with Bo Nix, Sean Payton wanted to get him a lot of easy throws underneath, but they really didn't have an explosive athlete when they got the ball in the hands on the short passes. Evan Ingram gives them that. Evan Ingram is a very speedy tight end, and to have that opening space up in the middle of the field and creating yards, that is a huge addition. Cortland Sutton obviously can go downfield. Marvin Mims was integrated, a lot of bubble screens in the second half, but this gives them more of a well-rounded look. Sean Payton's going to have fun with this. And then on the defensive side, Anthony, this is a very good defense last year. Their weakness was they were a little undersized up front, and these moves don't help that, but these are big moves. There were 2 49ers defenders who were last year coming back from serious injuries, who should now be 100%. Safety, Talanoa Hufanga, 3 years, $45 million. Excellent playmaker. Dre Greenlaw, the linebacker, 3 years, $35 million. Greenlaw could defend the pass well, and he also can stick his nose when he gets a run well. These are 2 outstanding defensive additions to go with Evan Ingram. I think this is quality over quantity. Thoughts on the Broncos?
Yeah, I think the Broncos are bigger winners on defense than they are offense. I like Evan Ingram. There is some injury concerns here and there that will creep in, but when he's on the field, we know he can handle a multitude of targets. We saw that, I believe, a year or so ago when he popped in fantasy, and a lot of it was PPR value when Christian Kirk went down. This Denver team, it is still lacking wide receivers. They have Sutton and a bunch of guys. I think Evan Ingram, if they don't address the wide receiver position, can realistically be the number 2 target leader on the Broncos. Defensively, this defense was one of the best in the NFL last year. With Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw, you can make the case that this could be the best defense. And you need that in the AFC when you have to take on teams like Cincinnati and Kansas City and Buffalo. I think, again, Denver, bigger winners on defense. Offensively, Ingram's nice, but they still need work at receiver. And I don't trust their running back room at all.
No, I am going to go with one more winner. So go to our last winning team here, Anthony. And I'm going to be a little generous here, I think. The Houston Texans. I gave them a B. Now, it's, again, top heavy, right? Christian Kirk. Now, we remember Liam Cohen, who's the head coach now of the Texans, will be running the offense. We know last year in Tampa Bay, I loved how he didn't completely take all the elements of Sean McVay's system. Like Sean McVay's system is you're a wide receiver. Yeah, you're a good receiver, but you're going to block your behind off. Mike Evans didn't have to block a whole lot because that's not who he is. And Cohen showed that versatility. That was a beautiful thing. Now, Chris Godwin, yeah, he blocks him because he's a great blocker. Well, Christian Kirk comes in here. And Kirk, we know the slot in the McVay style offense that Liam Cohen runs. This is a great place to be. Now, Christian Kirk probably won't be used a lot as a blocker because we learned from Cohen, he'll maximize his players. If you use Kirk as a blocker too much, you're prone to get him hurt, I think. And I think he'll be smart to not do that. This is a huge ad for Trevor Lawrence. Not for Trevor, for CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud's going to need it because remember, Tank Dell, serious knee injury. You know what? I totally wonked this. Everybody, I apologize. I'm crossing up my Jaguars with my Houston Texans. So I've got to slide back a minute. Again, my apologies. Just got crossed up here. Kirk being on the Texans. The offense with CJ Stroud. Apologize for the mistakes. You got Nico Collins on the outside. Nico Collins is obviously going to be that game breaker they need, but they need something underneath. And we said earlier, Tank Dell, probably not going to play this year if he is very limited, very serious knee injury. He has another surgery upcoming. And Stephon Diggs is gone. He had an ACL injury. Probably not going to see him back. Kirk's probably the number 2 in this offense. He should see a lot of volume. They also added safety CJ Gardner-Johnson, who can play some corner as well. They brought in an offensive lineman, Ed Ingram from the Vikings. That probably wasn't a great move. Ingram was not a strong player. Sheldon Rankins on the defense, just a $7 million deal to patch up the inside. I like the edge move for Darrell Taylor. He was with the Seahawks and the Bears. He flashes. He's never really had a chance. Injuries have kind of derailed him, but that's a good high upside move. Anthony, thoughts on the Texans?
I like what the Texans did. I will consider them a winner because they listen, Diggs is probably not coming back. We know Tank Dell's probably not playing this year. They needed wide receiver help, and Christian Kirk in the slot is a perfect fit. Defensively, I like some of the ads. My biggest question mark is the Laramie Tunsil trade. CJ Stroud, I don't think performed very well under pressure. Tunsil, I talked him up. We were talking about Washington. I think this is a big downgrade at left tackle. Maybe the Texans go in the draft and address that. But I think they're winners. But I do think that their offense could potentially struggle a little bit without the protection of Tunsil.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think they did not address an offensive line that was terrible last year. I can't quantify why their line was bad last year. The line had been decent in the past. It was a lot of the same personnel they had. I don't know if it was a coaching issue. I don't know if it was a Bobby Slowick offensive coordinator issue. They've moved on. So, but you're right. You lose an elite left tackle. That's a problem. I am willing to buy in on CJ Stroud after having a dip last year, that the coaching staff will figure out how to better optimize him. But I do agree with you. I think it was a bit irresponsible for them, the Houston Texans, to let that left tackle go. We'll see what they do in the draft, but that is definitely a problem. All right, everybody, we will come back and talk about some losers in free agency after we take a short break. All right, San Francisco 49ers, Anthony, are my biggest loser. I have them with an F in this draft. I do not know if this team is in a Super Bowl window anymore. They're in the NFC, so the playoffs probably shouldn't be a massive issue unless they get another McCaffrey injury. They lose Deebo Samuel on offense. They lose Jordan Mason, which is a backup to McCaffrey, but if McCaffrey goes down, it was a valuable piece. They lost, as we said earlier, in the winners section, they lost Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga to the Broncos. They lost Charvarius Ward, their best cover corner. Also, they didn't lose him, but another year older for Trent Williams, the all-world left tackle coming off a very injury-plagued season. Who were their additions in free agency? Tight end Luke Farrell was their big spend. 3 years, $20 million. Why bother? They probably could have got him for half that price if they wanted. DeMarcus Robinson, there's a savior. 2 years, $9.5 million. Mac Jones, 2 years, $7 million. Basically, they did nothing. They lost a ton. McCaffrey will be 29. Maybe he has another great year left in the tank, but that defense has been gutted with 3 high-end starters gone. Anthony?
Yeah, and a lot of the hype early in the offseason, they're getting Salah back. This defense is going to go back to what it was when we were chasing the Super Bowl. No, not without these starters that you lost. These offensive starters. Deebo gone. Are the 49ers looking themselves in the mirror? And obviously, you got to pay Brock Purdy. Are they looking at themselves and looking at the state of the NFC West right now with Darnold going to Seattle? That team looks like they're in a little bit of a rebuild. Plus, you have Sam Darnold for the next few years. The Rams looks like they might be going all in. But who knows how long Stafford's going to be around. And then you have the Cardinals with Kyler and his injury history. Maybe the 49ers are looking at it, hey, we're not going to totally concede 2025, but this might be the year we get our books right, we get a little bit younger, and then we're back to normal in 2026. Otherwise, I don't know the logic behind what they're doing.
No. So what would you put them very basic on odds to make the playoffs? I would probably put them at 65% to make the playoffs, hinging on McCaffrey's health. What would you say on that?
I don't want to sound like a 49ers hater, but I think you hit the nail on the head. If Christian McCaffrey's healthy, I would give them a 70% chance of making the playoffs. If Christian McCaffrey misses any more than 5 games, I would give them a 30% chance to make the playoffs.
If McCaffrey misses significant time, I could see the 49ers winning 6 games as an upside. Anything on that?
I mean, what did they win last year?
Not many.
Right?
Oh, exactly. Not many. 8, maybe 8.
Yeah. And with all these players that you lost, and McCaffrey misses time again. Yeah, I think 6 is about right as a downside for this football team. I mean, remember years before they got CMC and before they figured out quarterback, they didn't win a lot of games under Kyle Shanahan. It took some time to build.
Yes. If you're a 49ers fan, probably not a good offseason. And I like the 49ers, but I'm not real happy with the way this offseason shook out for them. Anyway, next loser, Anthony. Let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons. I gave them a D- in the draft and in the free agency, I should say. Now, when we're looking at them, they lost Grady Jarrett. Now, Jarrett was getting older. All right. So I'll say that for sure. And then they lost center Drew Dahlman, which I think was an important part of their offensive line. They did retain Jake Matthews, the left tackle, extended him out 2 years, $45 million. But who did they sign? Their big signing, linebacker Divine Diablo from the Raiders, 2 years, $14 million. Adequate player, fine. Edge, Leonard Floyd, okay, fine. Rotational rusher, Mike Ford, the corner, 2 years, $4 million, nothing there. They really added nothing of tangible substance. They're in a, not a great division in the NFC South, but they did not help themselves in free agency. This has not come out a better team because of that. Anyway, Anthony, thoughts on the Atlanta Falcons?
Yeah, I thought the Falcons last year, I was all in on Atlanta. We had brought in Cousins and Darnell Mooney. I thought this team was trending in the right direction, and it just didn't work out. Now this is a team where, what is the state of their quarterback position? And if they do go move on from Kirk Cousins, is this a team that can once again chase Tampa Bay? Because right now, Tampa Bay looks like the team to beat in the NFC South. Right now, it looks like a team like Carolina, they could be ascending if Bryce Young continues to play like he played how he ended last season. So the state of the Falcons right now, I think this is a team that might have taken a step back.
Yeah, I am not excited for them right now. The Kirk Cousins things befuddles me. The fact that they took on another $10 million, they let that dead date pass, took that on. I don't see why they wouldn't have moved him. And now, even if they don't believe in Penix, they already know Kirk Cousins is getting into the promised land.
Yeah.
So if Penix is a bust, well, they weren't going to do much better with Cousins. They weren't going to make a Super Bowl run with him. They could have got something. Even if it was a late round pick, they could have gotten something for him to add to the roster. I just think they mismanaged this offseason. I'm not on the positive side of the jury of Michael Penix, but that's another story for another day. But I do think the Falcons big loser in free agency. Hey, if you want to win more in your golf, March Madness, and football pools, Pool Genius gives you data-driven picks and strategies to outsmart the competition. With over a decade of analytics and historical data, Pool Genius is the only site dedicated exclusively to helping people win sports pools, with Pool Genius users winning 3 times more often than expected. RotoWire listeners get exclusive offers. Visit poolgenius.com/RotoWire for up to 55% off, or you could start a 4-day free trial. That's poolgenius.com/RotoWire. Anthony, we got a couple of loser teams left in free agency. Kansas City Chiefs, I gave them a D for the offseason. Now, it was good that they were able to retain Trey Smith by placing the franchise tag on him. So that was positive. And bringing Nick Bolton, the linebacker, back 3 years, $45 million. And I'm happy they brought Hollywood Brown back, even though he was injured, missed the season. I think he really can add an element to this offense. But otherwise, free agency, not kind. They brought in Gardner Minshew. Oh, gee, thanks. Even if Mahomes hurts, ship's going down. Christian Fulton's not a good corner. Jalen Moore was a surprise signing. Left tackle, 2 years, $30 million. He was a backup for the 49ers, but he did step in when Trent Williams got hurt, and he did not play badly. So they're taking a chance that Jalen Moore began development and will be something, but to me, that was a reach. And then Elijah Mitchell, 1 year, $3 million. Again, poor young man just can't stay on the field. So I think they really added nothing of substance unless they strike gold with Jalen Moore. But I'm not willing to go out on the limb and say they hit the jackpot because I don't think anybody else was targeting Jalen Moore. Maybe I'm wrong. Thoughts on the Chiefs offseason?
Chiefs offseason is not going well. You bring up Jalen Moore, they overpaid to get him. And I know I was one to say, hey, maybe they go get that explosive running back with the 31st pick in the NFL draft. The signs are telling us that's not going to happen with Elijah Mitchell and re-signing Kareem Hunt. So maybe they go and take a shot on a tackle, but they need to get some work done here because this Kansas City team, they showed us in the Super Bowl, if they have to beat an elite team like Philly, they're going to get the floor wiped with them. And we saw this happen already. Now, they did re-sign Hollywood Brown. They got Worthy and Rashee Rice coming back, although Rice is going to serve some sort of suspension. The pieces are there on offense, but the biggest handicap, as we've said through the years, is the offensive line and not addressing the offensive line. On top of that, losing Joe Thuney, I think this potentially sets Kansas City back light years because Mahomes, got to remember, the 2 Super Bowls Mahomes lost, they couldn't protect him.
Yes. Now, when you bring that up, Mahomes is interesting. We remember Tom Brady. If you got interior pressure on Brady, it was a massive problem. Yeah. So he had to have a great interior line to help him. Mahomes is the opposite. He relies on his tackles. He needs the outside help. I think the Chiefs probably realize this because when the pressure comes from inside, Mahomes just breaks contain and he makes his own little beautiful like music by getting outside the pocket and extending the play. But we've seen it, and you hit the nail on the head. You see it in the Super Bowls years ago against Tampa, and you saw it just about a month ago against the Eagles. You saw when pressure is coming from the outside, those tackles weren't holding up. Mahomes is in trouble. So letting Thuney go, again, not a great move. I agree with you. But I think if they don't hit him that Jalen Moore as that left tackle, or they don't address it in the draft, it's going to be a continued problem. And it's going to be hard to consider the Chiefs another like pre-Super Bowl pick as a winner because we know that's an Achilles heel unless they have that fixed right now. But I do think with the pass rush against them, it's the tackles they need. Any quick thought on that?
Do you think that, what do you think they do in a draft? I guess that's my question, my counter question. Is it offensive line or do they have to fill some holes on defense? They brought in Christian Fulton, serviceable corner, former first-round pick, and Jerry Tillery, another former first-round pick. But is that enough? Because this defense did take a step back last season.
I think history teaches us something, Anthony. When Tampa Bay won that Super Bowl and they got all over Patrick Mahomes, what did the Chiefs do that offseason? They went after the offensive line. They got Trey Smith in the draft. They got Creed Humphrey. And I don't know if that's the year they got Thuney or not after that, but it was close to that. But they just made sure Mahomes was protected. And what did they do? We've seen them win. They won back-to-back Super Bowls before losing this year. So we knew that they were able to fix that issue when it came up. Now, again, Jalen Moore in free agency, again, I'm very questionable on that one, but I think the focus in the draft will be offensive line because they realize if Patrick Mahomes is right, they're right.
Yeah.
Nothing else matters. And with Mahomes, I still think Xavier Worthy in a second year, even if Rashee Rice does miss time with suspension, he'll be there when it matters. And Hollywood Brown, if he's healthy, what they wanted last year. And Kelsey's back, even though he's older. If you got those 3 other weapons and Kelsey, that's another ball game. So I think we were hoping for the dangerous fantasy upside of Mahomes last year, and we didn't get it. But I think it was because of injuries more than anything else. And I think if they do address the line in the draft again, I believe the defensive hits won't matter because I think they can go back to outscoring anybody. Counter that up?
No, I think it's a good point. And, I remember that, and I get it was against, Eagles backups at that point. That downfield pass, right? The throw to Xavier Worthy, right? It was a deep ball. I don't remember the last time I saw a deep ball hit like that for Kansas City. And maybe, that's a sign that, hey, we need to do this again. They need to get this offense humming to where they can hit on these deep balls and they don't have to dink and dunk down the field to score points. Those old Kansas City Chiefs teams, when Patrick Mahomes throwing 40-plus touchdowns a year, they have the burner like Tyreek Hill. They can do a little bit of everything. Past few years, they seem like a dink and dunk team. And I think Kansas City, they need to open it back up.
You see, Anthony, and that was what the fallout of Mahomes and then later Jamar Chase being so good at game-breaking plays, that was when the league shifted to the 2 high safety move. Because there was a lot of 1 high safeties. And that's how Mahomes was putting up the pinball numbers, because there was 1 high safety. They just had to manipulate that safety, and they were just having fireworks all day long. And we saw Jamar Chase in his first year, he had like 1,455 yards. We saw some of the same. And then the league went 2 high. Now Chase was able to win underneath, and he did it. But the Chiefs have been a work in progress on offense since. And the whole point, I thought, the last year, and why we were excited, because we said, now repeat this. At the time, they had Rashee Rice, who was going to be like a nice short and intermediate player. Worthy and Brown as a combination would be able to put enough stress on the defense at their speed that they'd be able to create angles and attack the 2 high safeties. It never came together. So I think the vision was there last year. And I think, like you said, we want to get those explosive plays back. And I think their plan was to do it through personnel, and that personnel may actually be there this year. So I do think we have a chance. I love your call on that one. Let's go to one last loser team, and I know that you will hate this, but I think you probably know I'm right. The all-in Dallas Cowboys. I gave them a D. They lost DeMarcus Lawrence in free agency. Now, say what you will, he's still a very good pass rusher. In trades, they got cornerback Kyer Elam, former first-round pick, I believe, in the Bills, has not played well. Kenneth Murray, linebacker from the Titans. Kenneth Murray flamed out with the Chargers, wasn't much better with the Titans. These are players I don't think that you really want on your roster, yet Dallas traded for them. Now, who do they sign? Solomon Thomas, defensive tackle. He was good at the Niners a number of years back, but he's like a rotational player now, 2 years, $8 million. In running backs, they paired it up. Javonte Williams, 1 year, $3 million. I think incentives can get that to 3.5. And then Miles Sanders, who since leaving Philadelphia, obviously has not been the player he was with the Panthers. Limited effectiveness, injured. I don't see much of that. I mean, maybe they can strike gold with that running back combination. They're really like preying on a lottery ticket there. I really think Dallas did nothing in free agency. Thoughts?
No, and I'm not loving the coaching staff they put together after moving on from Mike McCarthy. That makes them losers. And then the personnel decisions, Javonte, Miles Sanders. Why don't you just pay Rico Dowdle, who looked like a legitimate running back, and now he's in Carolina, and he didn't even sign for that much. The offensive line, you lost Zach Martin, future Hall of Fame player. I think this is a team that is legitimately rebuilding right now, whether Jerry wants to believe it or not. You know, Cooks is probably not coming back, and your replacement so far is Paris Campbell. You spent the 4th on Jonathan Mingo. You spent the 4th on Trey Lance, who's not on the roster right now. And one of the biggest losses people aren't going to talk enough about, Cooper Rush, probably the best backup quarterback in football.
It was
Dak has an injury history.
Right? He definitely does. And so as it stands right now, I just am very hard pressed to see Dallas as a playoff team. It just, I don't see it. You got Micah Parsons, beautiful. Like I said, Dak hopefully stays healthy. You got CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, I love. Right now, is this a 7 or 8 win team?
Barely 500 as is.
Oh. How times have changed. And I know Dallas hasn't won a Super Bowl since 95. We're going to have 3 decades. But the last 2 off seasons, I just don't know what this organization's direction is, because right now this is a team completely trending downward.
Yeah.
And I don't see any way that they're able to dig themselves out of this anytime soon. So if you're a Cowboys fan like Anthony Cervino right now, you're just hoping something changes fast. But and based on the way we're looking, not so much. A couple of things here, Anthony. Be a part of the RotoWire community on our new and improved Discord server. We share fantasy advice, find prop at the tail. You can interact with some of your favorite RotoWire experts. You could join the conversation at rotowire.com/chat. Remember, RotoWire covers all the fantasy sports. Did you know you get a free 2-day trial with no credit card needed? Check it out. All the sports again. You go to rotowire.com/pod. Again, that's rotowire.com/pod. We want to thank our sponsors, Pool Genius and Edge Boost. We want to thank everyone for listening. Come back next week for another edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast.